could never lose my hope. I've been down this road before. Now I know which way to go. You can try to drag me down, but I'll be living in the clouds. Everybody has their doubts, but you can't stop now. You just gotta live. You just gotta live. You just gotta live.
Hey, New Dawn Church, it's so good to be with you again. We've missed you, and I know this is kind of a strange setting, but I think we're going to do just fine. Thank God for technology, and like much of the country, much of the churches across the country, we've gone to online, and so we are so grateful for the opportunity to be in your home. We hope that you're watching with your family right now, and just want to welcome you all over South Florida, or wherever you may be watching across the world. We're glad to have you with us this morning. So obviously, preaching to an empty auditorium is a little bit strange for me, but that's okay. We'll get past it, and I know that you're going to be watching on the other side of this. So it's new for everybody. It's a learning curve. We'll get there. It's all right. We're in this together, right? All in this together. Listen, we're going to start a series today that I'm very excited about, and the series is called Jesus is Hope, and it's so appropriate for times like right now when there's so much confusion and so much darkness and hurt in the world and so many doubts and fear. And honestly, we started thinking of this series long before the coronavirus was ever part of the conversation, and so God has already been working towards this series, and so I'm confident that He's going to have a powerful word for you. So we get that started today, and I know this has been a crazy time, and I hope that you're all home safe and healthy and have plenty of toilet paper and whatever else you need. If you don't, please let us know, and we will see what we can do to drive by your house and throw some out the window at you. We'll do a drive-by toilet paper. Is that a thing? I don't know. Whatever. But without a doubt, I think a lot of us over the last few weeks have been at a place where we've asked ourselves the question, what is going on right now? What is happening? Like, this is crazy. No one's ever seen anything like this before. And all you got to do is drive by a store or drive by a pharmacy or any place like that, and you're going, I don't understand this. This is new for everybody. What is happening right now? And I've heard so many people ask that question. What is going on? Like, what is going on? Like someone's playing a sick joke on the world right now, right? And if you were some third party, that may look like a logical explanation to this. A worldwide pandemic virus attack, like it's crazy, and how people are responding. It's very, very evident to me when I go in the grocery store, any grocery store or anywhere, and see cleared out complete aisles that are cleared out completely, cleaned out, just empty. It's very clear that this world is operating in a mentality of fear right now. And people are reacting in certain ways and want to do the best for their family, make sure they're, prepping for Y2K, whatever it is they're doing. And so there's a lot of questions, a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of fear right now. What is happening? And I heard somebody say the other day on the radio, they said, I'd like to know what God is doing right now. Where is God? Where is He in the middle of all of this? It's interesting to me how people who don't really give God credit for their lives when things are good, they're the first ones to blame Him when things go bad. That's funny. So it's convenient for them. But they pose the question, where is God right now? Where is He? Why is this happening? Well, I have to say, I don't know the why. And I think anybody who tries to explain the why is probably mistaken. I would never presume to understand why this is happening. However, I can speak with a little confidence as to the where God is. I believe I have an insight on the where. So here's what I know. I know that God is exactly where he has always been. So if somebody asks you, where is God? He's in the same place he has always been. God is on his throne. And that's where he is. And he has not left the throne. This whole crisis did not shock him off the throne. You know, he's not going, what is going on down there? I have no idea. This is getting out of hand. I mean, I feel like I got to call in extra angel. Like, I don't know. God is never surprised. He has not been surprised by this for 1 second. This did not surprise him. And not only is he on the throne, he is in complete control of this situation, of our lives, and of the outcome. And so that's where God is. He's where he has always been. He's in control on his throne. And so, well, someone might say, well, if God is on the throne and if he is in control, doesn't that mean that he allowed this to happen? Like, he had to allow this to happen, right? And if he allowed this to happen, doesn't that logically mean that this has to be part of his plan, right? If God's on the throne, he's in control, it means he allowed it to happen. It means it's a part of his plan, logically speaking. And does that mean that God's plan involves a worldwide pandemic, countless people getting sick, and tons and tons and tons of people dying? Is that part of God's plan? Once again, I'm not going to be bold enough to take a stab at the why God has allowed these things to happen. But if you don't like his plan, I mean, you know what? You may have a better plan for governing the world and ruling the universe. You may have a different plan. And I may have it. You know what? But what I know about my plans is that every time I make plans, and if I were to make plans that involve controlling and ruling the universe, my plans, and I would venture to say that probably your plans as well, probably include a large amount of convenience for us personally and comfort, right? Like, I'm not making plans to rule the universe unless it involves me sitting on a beach somewhere, getting a sunburn and drinking drinks with an umbrella in it. That's always part of our plan, isn't it? And comfort and convenience. That would be a great plan for all of us to be comfortable and convenient. However, history tells us something different. History reveals that anytime we've seen God work, even throughout Scripture or personally or throughout history, when God has done something miraculous and when we have seen God work in a powerful way, it's never been in a time of convenience or comfort, right? And so anytime there's inconvenience and discomfort, I guess you could designate this time as inconvenient and uncomfortable, and the most difficult times throughout history is when God has showed up and done some of his most powerful work in humanity. And I would venture to say that if you were to maybe go back in your life and rewind and try and remember the moments when you experienced God's presence and his hand in your life the most, were most likely during the hardest times of your life. That's where we see God move in powerful ways. And so, what is his plan through all this? I'm not sure. I don't know. But I know that he's in control. And I know that it's in times like this when he can show off. This is where he shines. And when the world has no answers to anything and no solutions to any problem, then God says, all right, now look what I can do. This is what I can do. Look who I am. And so whether or not we've got the answer is not the point as far as I'm concerned. The point is, do you know personally the God of the universe? Do you know the one who has this whole situation in his hands, who already knows the outcome, who knows your future, my future, and holds it in his hands? That's the question. God is where he's always been. And so we can't help but talk about fear because unless you know Christ as your Savior and have a personal relationship with Jesus, you are looking at this thing from the outside in, and you are in a place of complete chaos as far as the world is right now, and you are in a place of a complete uncertainty, of complete doubt, and most likely a place of fear. And whether or not the media is telling you need to stay calm, yeah, good luck with that, right? Because based on what are you telling me to stay calm? No one can tell me what's going to happen tomorrow. No one can tell me if I'm going to have a job next week, or if I'm able to feed my family in a month. No one has answers right now. And so if you're on the outside looking in, yeah, this is a very uncertain time. So I feel like that carries over into our lives as Christians as well. If we're not careful, that will infect us. That fear will infect our lives, and we will live a life dominated by fear. And I believe that I can say with some confidence that many of us live that way. And I know that because I'm following social media, I'm following online and watching TV, and some of the most scared people that I know, the most anxious people that are speaking out are Christians. And I'm thinking, my gosh, what is happening? If anyone has a reason not to be afraid, it should be people who profess to know Christ, right? But it's not always that way, because we live in a real world, and it's scary sometimes. And in times like this, it's inevitable that we battle with that fear. So I'm not judging you for being afraid, because I'm telling you right now, we've all asked ourselves that question in the last few weeks, at least a few times, of what is going on and what's going to happen. What's going to happen? Are we going to be okay, right? And that's a normal reaction, I think, as humans for us to have. And so that's why I think the passage and the word that I have for you today is going to speak right to the truth of where we're at right now. God is on his throne, and we can rest easy in that. We know that he is there and he is always in control. But even knowing that in our head always doesn't translate into our heart in how we live that out. And we find ourselves in situations where it's easy to get infected, no pun intended, with the fear of the world around us right now, because we're exposed to the same media, the same news, the same bad news, that is, on constant basis. I mean, constant. And so we can't help it. We find ourselves there, and we fall into it as well. We fall into that fear. I know this about my God. I know that exactly when you need him the most, and exactly where you need him the most, he is already there. He has already been and is already at the place where you need him the most, when you need him the most. And here's what I want to tell you today. His presence changes everything. God's presence, the presence of Jesus, changes everything. His presence is why we have hope. His presence is why we can have hope for the future and a hope for getting through this. Without God's presence, without God in this situation, there is no hope. There is no hope. There is no future. It's his presence, and because of his presence, that we can have hope. The Apostle Paul speaks to the church in Philippi, and he writes them a letter, and I want to share this passage with you, and then I'm going to read another passage in a second. But if you got your Bibles with you in front of your paper Bibles, if not, you can access the Bible app right in front of you on your screen. And in the book of Philippians in the New Testament, chapter 4, the Apostle Paul says this to the church in Philippi. He says in verse 6, "Do not be anxious about anything." It's a pretty broad statement. I mean, like anything. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation. In what situation? Every situation, by prayer and petition and thanksgiving, present your request to God. Paul is telling these people of this church, he says that first and foremost, don't freak out about anything. And in everything, I want you to go to God first. No matter the situation, anything, everything, go to God first. before you turn on the media, before you freak out about the bad news, take it to God in prayer. And if this situation worldwide has done something good, I think that it's brought a lot of people to their knees that have not dusted off their knees in a long time. And a lot of people are praying, but why do we wait till it's our last resort? You notice that? A lot of times we wait till going to God is our last resort before we actually go and pray and ask him to intervene in our situation or tell him our concerns or whatever the case may be. We wait till God is our last option before we do that. And Paul says, listen, don't be anxious about anything. In every situation, go to God first in prayer. Pray. Listen, we have a powerful, powerful weapon in prayer, and I don't believe that we access it nearly as often as we need to. There is power in prayer. The Bible tells us that God hears our prayer, and he intervenes in our situation. He cares. He cares what's going on in your life. He cares what you're feeling. He cares what's on your heart. So tell him. Take it to him and pray. And he carries on in verse 7. He says, if you'll do this, if you won't be anxious, if you'll take it to God, verse 7 says, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your heart and your minds in Christ Jesus. The peace of God, which transcends all understanding. It goes beyond anything you can ever explain, this peace that only God can give. It cannot be described. It cannot be explained. You can't define it. And it's not logical. In the moments when you should be freaking out and be anxious, those are the moments that God can give you a peace that you can't explain. Many of you have experienced this peace in your life in different times of loss, times of difficulty. You have given it to God and laid it at the feet of Jesus, and you have been overwhelmed with a peace that has no explanation, that it goes beyond what you can understand. And I think we can't help but talk about some of those fears, because if we're going to talk about what is overcoming us right now, we need to define it a little bit better, especially if we're going to look at it through the lens of this passage right here. If you do any reading, if you've researched any kind of material on fear, then you'll know that there's 4 predominant types of fears out there in general, terminologies and things like that. But generally speaking, it's failure, rejection, loss, and fear of the unknown. Those are typically the 4 predominant fears that you're going to find out there. And I think at least 2 of those apply to most of us right now through what we're going through this time. And that's the fear, one fear of loss. But even more than that, I think, is the fear of the unknown. Fear of the unknown is one of the most powerful fears that we can give ourselves into. And if you think about it, probably for most of us, the most fearful time in your life, at least for me, is when there's those moments of unknown, of something you don't know what the outcome's going to be, and there's just no way to find out any information. We're so afraid of the unknown because it's unknown, right? And we don't know. And we feel like, man, if I could just have some information on what's happening, then I could be, I could be more calm, or I could relax a little bit. But the truth is that doesn't really matter, does it? Because then when we get the information, then it makes it even worse. And then we have more anxiety and more worry and more whatever. And so it just kind of compounds. We believe that information, we associate information with peace. If I could just know, then I could just breathe easy a little bit, right? And when your kids are out, for instance, or when something happens and one of your kids, you don't know what the outcome's going to be, if there's a sickness and there's just some unknown factor, there is a fear that is battling you at that moment that you cannot describe. And I'm telling you, some of the scariest moments of my life have been when there was an unknown factor. And that's when I've had the most fear. That's when I've had the most anxiety. And maybe that's the same for you. And so we like to associate, if there's fear in the unknown, then there must be peace with the known, right? We kind of, on our logic, try to make sense that way. If I'm fearful of the unknown, that means I've got to have some sort of peace in knowing. But that isn't the case, is it? It's not the case at all. Why? Because here's what we know. Here's what I know. I know that information does not bring you peace. Information does not bring peace. It doesn't give you peace. Knowledge doesn't give you peace. Because as soon as you have that information or that knowledge, you're just going to find something else to worry about, or some other aspect to be anxious about, or something else to fear. Knowledge in itself, information, does not give you the peace that you're seeking in that moment. And it won't calm your heart, and it won't ease your fear. So information is not where we need to look for peace. What am I saying by that? Turn the TV off for a few minutes, all right? The world's not going to collapse in the few minutes that you turn. Just turn it off. Turn it off. Shut it off. Close the laptop. Turn the phone off. Stop. Because information doesn't bring you peace, does it? Yes, that's right. You just proved my point. Exactly. Now you believe me. Watching more of whatever newscast you want to watch, you prefer, is not going to ease your mind. It's not going to make you calm, and it's not going to give you peace. So turn it off for a while. It's going to be okay. You'll be all right. So if information doesn't bring peace, what is Paul saying then? Paul says there's going to be some things in your life for which there is no explanation. Some things are going to happen in the course of your life that you cannot make sense of. Things are going to happen to you. You're going to find yourself in situations and circumstances that you cannot explain, that don't make sense, and that don't have a reason. That's a fact. That's going to happen. He says, but it doesn't end there. It's in those moments that I want you not to be anxious, but go to God and pray. And what God can do in those moments when there's no explanation for what's happening in your life, when you can't find a reason for why God is allowing this, he says in those moments, God can give you a peace that goes beyond any kind of explanation, a peace that transcends any kind of reasoning or any kind of comprehension. You don't have to understand why in order to have God's peace. We don't have to know the outcome. We don't have to know what's going to happen in order to experience his peace. You can have peace in the unknown. And that is something that nobody in the world or nothing in the world can offer you. No avenue, no media, no resource in the world can give you peace in the unknown, because it's unknown. And it's unknown because no one knows it, right? That seems obvious. But that's not actually the case. What is unknown to us is never unknown to God. Did you realize that? What we can never explain, God doesn't even have to. What is uncertain for us is certain for God. He knows the unknown. For him, there are no unknowns. And so when you put your trust in the only one who has no unknowns, he is the only one who can give you peace in what you think are unknown or what you don't know. When you don't see the future, when you don't know the outcome, you can't get peace anywhere except through him, because there's no unknown for him. He's already been there. He's exactly where you need him to be, when you need him to be there. He's already there. And his presence changes everything. When you know that God is with you, his presence brings peace. His presence brings hope. Only God can do that. Only God can give that kind of peace. And Paul says you got to go to him. You got to lay it at his feet. And God will give you the peace, like a peace that no one can explain, that transcends all kind of knowledge and understanding. That's what God can do. And Christians, we live in fear. We live in fear because we either lose sight of this truth, or we simply choose to ignore it, or we choose to let in the noise of all of the other avenues out there, all of the other mediums that we're listening to. And there's so much going on. There's so much drawing our attention and our focus that we don't remember. We choose not to pay attention to the simple truth that the only one who can give peace is already with me right now. And that's Jesus. That's God himself. So, where do we take it from here? If we know that God is on his throne, he's already there, he's with me every step of the way, and only he can give me the peace that goes beyond understanding, then why do we usually choose to fear in these situations? Why? Why is it so easy to fear rather than to trust in God? And I think for a lot of us, it's because fear is not really a choice for us. When we are faced with these kinds of situations and circumstances where there is no answer, where it's a tragedy or a crisis or catastrophe, fear isn't a choice so much as it is a reaction to us. And so for a lot of us, that's what it is. Fear is just a reaction to what's happening in the world. It's a normal reaction. It's a normal way of thinking, and that's how we approach fear. And so we allow fear in and say, hey, this is normal, right? This is normal. And somewhat, but if you think about it, listen, there is no Bible verse that has been quoted over the last 2 weeks more than you've heard it. And I made sure I did not put it in my outline because I refuse to say it at this point. It's a phenomenal verse. It's my wife's life verse. You all know it. Say it with me. For God is not giving us the spirit of, you got it, fear. So not going there. We know that fear is not from God, right? We've heard it repeated over and over and over. We've declared it. So some would say, well, fear is just a lack of faith in God, right? If it's not from God, it's just not having faith in Him. I would take it a step further. I mean, fear is, sure, it is a lack of faith, but it's also can be placing our faith in the wrong thing as well. And by choosing to allow fear into our life, I believe we are placing our faith in the what ifs of life, and the what ifs. And for a lot of us, that is where our biggest source of anxiety comes from, in the what ifs. Some of you know what I'm talking about. What if? What if something bad happens? What if I let my kids go play outside and something horrible happens? What if I get into an accident? Or what if I lose my job? Or what if one of my kids gets sick? Or what if I lose a child? What if I lose a parent? What if I lose a loved one? What if I don't have enough food to eat? What if we run out of toilet paper? What are we going to do? There's what ifs that torture us and can be our source of anxiety and fear. And when we allow fear in, it's putting our faith in the what ifs. It's trusting the knowledge. If once we find out the what ifs, if we can answer the question of what if, then we can be at peace, right? If we can eliminate the what if, then that means I can be calm. But that never happens because for us it's unknown, right? You can never know what if. That's an unknown. God knows. He knows what is and what isn't. So he's already been there. So don't put your trust in the what ifs, because that's allowing fear into your life. But what is this? Why is it so important though? Why are the what ifs so important? Why is acknowledging the fear so important for us as Christians if we know that fear is not from God? Well, 2 reasons why I believe acknowledging fear and calling it out is so important to us. Number 1, it's because what you fear most, or what we fear most, oftentimes reveals what we value most. And so what we fear might have is because if I fear that something's going to happen to my kids, it's only because I value my kids, right? If I fear that I'm going to lose my job, it's because I value my job. If I fear that our marriage might end in divorce, it's because I value my marriage. And you see how that progression goes. And so fear can reveal what you value most, but on the other hand, also what we most fear can also reveal where we trust God the least. So yeah, it can reveal what we value, but can also reveal where we trust God the least in our life. Because when it comes to something that we value, like a loved one, like our family, like our kids, like then we tend to try and control it, right? Don't we? We try and if I could just keep control over it, if I could just not let it out of my sight, not let them out of my sight, out of my hands. And the sad reality is, that's the reality of life, is that we are never ever in control. It's an illusion. And we try so hard to keep control, not to be out of control. We want control. And no one has control. Control is an illusion. You never have control in your life. The only thing you can control in your life is you, how you respond and how you react to different things in life. So that's why it's so important. And I want to share this passage with you. This is one of my favorite passages in Scripture, one of my favorite stories. And you can find it in at least 3 of the Gospels. And I like personally how Mark tells the story in the book of Mark. So go with me to the book of Mark, second book in the New Testament. Let's go to chapter 4. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard this story before. There's several occasions in which Jesus found himself in and around the water or in and around a boat. And this is one of those. And so Mark chapter 4, it tells the story of when Jesus was speaking to a great multitude, and he decided to end that and go across the lake. And so let's pick it up in verse 35 of Mark chapter 4. It says this, as evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, let's cross to the other side of the lake. So they took Jesus in the boat and started out, leaving the crowds behind, although other boats followed. But soon a fierce storm came up. High winds were breaking into the boat, and it began to fill with water. Now, this is the part I love. Jesus, in verse 38, Jesus was asleep at the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. Where did he find a pillow to take on the boat? That to me is hilarious. Like, that to me tells me Jesus was either, if he brought this little, the travel pillow, I don't know, maybe he had a travel pillow, the inflatable ones he kept, I don't know, but he got it somewhere, and he was planning on napping on this cruise, right? 3-hour cruise or whatever. Jesus was planning on this, and so the storm comes in, and Jesus was taking a nap down the back of the boat with his little pillow. That is so awesome to me. I just think that's hilarious. It's funny. Jesus is sleeping with his head on a cushion. The disciples woke him up. They had to wake him up, shouting, "Teacher, don't you care that we're going to drown?" Which, this is a message for a whole nother day. We could preach a whole sermon on this, about the worst question the disciples ever asked Jesus. This may be one of the top contenders. Do you not care that we're going to drown? And I imagine Jesus kind of groggy-eyed a little bit, waking up. Jesus woke up. He rebuked the wind and said to the waves, "Silence, be still." Suddenly, the wind stopped, and there was a great calm. Then he asked them, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? Those are 2 loaded questions that Jesus asked his disciples. 41 says the disciples were absolutely terrified. Who is this man? They asked each other. Even the wind and the waves obey him. Jesus says, "Silence, be still." Be still. That term, be still, literally means be quiet. Hush, shut up. And I know Jesus was referring to the waves and the sea, but I can't help but think in my own mind, this is how I see it, how I perceive it anyway. I could be wrong, but I can't help but think that Jesus might have been intending a little bit of that to his disciples as well. Like, y'all need to just shut up, all right? Be quiet. Like, all I hear is this, and I want to be hearing more of this, okay? Like, chill, hush, be quiet. In the middle of the storm, Jesus was asleep. It didn't faze him. This storm that everyone in the boat was so terrified of, to the point they were certain that they were going to die. They were sure, this is the end. Guys, this is it. Guys, we're just trying to take Jesus across. This is it. This is how we die. This is how we die. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you felt that, and that was actually the what came to your mind was, okay, I guess this is how I die. And maybe you're that level-headed in crisis. I'm not. But maybe that was going through their mind. This is how it ends. This is how it ends. They were fearful to the point of anxiety and just out of control. Like, they were afraid. They were terrified. They thought they were going to die. And Jesus was asleep. Notice the contrast, the complete opposite. In the same situation, the same circumstances, the same storm, the same waves, the boat was taking on water at this point, and the way that Jesus reacted and the way that the disciples reacted is polar opposite. In the midst of the storm, when everyone on board thought that this was the end, they did not see how they were getting out of this. There was no way through this. Jesus had something else in mind. Jesus had a completely different agenda than this. And so he got a little frustrated at this point with his disciples. He said, "Why are you so afraid?" Almost like an accusative, almost annoying question. Bro, why are you freaking out so bad? Why are you so afraid? And then he poses another accusative question. Do you still not have faith? Like what else do I have to do so that you start to trust my words, so that you start to trust what I had said to you? Because if they had paid attention before they got in the boat, when they were on the shore, Jesus spoke words to them. And apparently in the middle of the storm, they were so focused on their circumstances, they forgot at what Jesus had said before they got in the boat. You see, Jesus, who is God, the creator of this lake that they were going to get in, and who directs the winds and created everything, that same Jesus said to them at the beginning, let's cross to the other side of the lake. He didn't say, hey, you know what, there's a wind coming in, but let's get in the boat, let's see how far we get. Let's take a shot at it and see if we can pull it off, right? Let's see if we can get there. I mean, it's a 50-50, but let's just put it out there, maybe we'll get there. Or let's go out in the middle of the lake, maybe we'll die. No, Jesus spoke words of certainty. He said, let's go to the other side of the lake. And when the God of the universe says to you, hey, let's go to the other side of the lake, where do you think you're going to end up? Most likely on the other side of the lake. But in the midst of the storm, the disciples forgot what Jesus had told them. And so, despite what he said, that Jesus was going to end up at the other side of the lake, one way or the other, they decided to put their attention and their focus on what was happening around them at that moment. On a storm that came in so bad that they didn't see a positive outcome, that they thought they were going to die. They thought this is the end. I can't think of a better example of what is happening right now in the world in this passage right here. We can all agree that this is a storm, if you will, unlike we've ever seen. Arguably unlike the world has ever seen. Something that has affected the entire globe to such extent, I don't know, at least not in modern times and being covered and so in. And you can argue conspiracy theory, you can say whatever you want, but the fact remains is that the great majority of the world right now is in crisis and is in the middle of a storm which many people don't see a positive outcome. It's a storm to such extent that a lot of people believe that this is the end. I've heard several reports of people believing I guess this is how we die, right? I guess this is the end, y'all. Might as well go prep our bunker or something, or get some machetes and get ready for the zombies. But there's people out there that this is what they've been preparing for the whole time, and they'll crawl underground. I don't know what they're going to do, and I don't think they'll have enough toilet paper, though. That's for sure. But people are perceiving this in such a horrifying way, as though this is the end, and they're consumed by the storm around us. And if we're not careful, guys, listen, as Christians, we will get sucked into that same agenda, that same focus, and we will put all of our attention on our circumstances, on the storm that's raging around us, on the winds and the waves and the rocking back and forth and the uncertainty and the unknown of it. And when you are faced with a storm, specifically like this, but in your life, at any storm that you face, I would encourage you not to make the same mistake that the disciples made in that storm. You see, in the middle of their storm, when everything was going wrong around them and they thought they were going to die, they made a grave mistake. Don't forget who is in the boat with you. In the midst of the storm, they forgot who was in their boat with them. Had they just stopped for a second and realized, yeah, this storm seems bad, but guess what, guys? We got Jesus. Like, Jesus is in the boat. Yeah, sure, he's taking a nap and everything, but Jesus is in the boat. And let me tell you, his presence changes everything. His presence changes everything. When you know that Jesus is in the boat with you, what storm are you going to be afraid of? What can you not weather when you know who is with you? And when you are certain and live with the conviction of whose presence you are in, who are you going to fear? What storm are you going to fear when you know, when you live with the certainty that Jesus is with you, that you are in the presence of Almighty God, and that he has not left you for 1 second, and that he has always been exactly where he has always been. He has always been on his throne, and he has always been in control. And Jesus is with you always. How is it so easy for us to lose sight of that, to forget that we are in his presence? And it's so simple, seemingly, but we allow ourselves to be so consumed by the noise, by the storm, by the waves and the wind and the water that we just forget. We forget who is in the boat with us. We forget to whom we belong and in whose presence we stand. And if God is with you, who can be against you? What storm can you not face when Jesus is in the boat with you? He's in the boat. What fear? What fear? Don't forget who's in the boat. Don't forget. His presence is what gives us peace. His presence is what gives us hope. Living in his presence is why we can not know what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day or next week and still have confidence in the fact that it's going to be okay. It's going to be all right. We can have peace in the midst of the storm because we are in his presence and because he is with us. He's in the boat. Don't get distracted by what the media is saying. Don't get sidetracked, or don't lose your focus because of what CNN or Fox News or ABC, NBC, whatever it is you like to listen to or watch. Don't lose sight of the one truth that changes everything. Jesus is in the boat. He's in the boat. And if he's in the boat, we can make it through any storm. And it's when we start to understand that truth that it makes the difference in our lives. Not just our lives, our families' lives, but it doesn't stop there. When you live with that kind of peace, the kind of peace that only God can give you in moments of complete uncertainty, in moments of complete fear, when everybody else is losing their mind or in then complete chaos, and you're walking around with a peace that no one can explain, that draws attention. That shakes things up. That makes people notice. That is what brings hope into a lost and dying world. It's us. So I don't know what God's ultimate plan is for all of this. I don't know. I know that he will get glory in this situation, hands down. But maybe through all of this, one of his purposes, at least for us, is to shine even brighter than before through the peace that we can only get through God in this time, and offering the world a hope that no one else can offer, and offering a hope that only comes through knowing Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. That, in the middle of the storm, makes all the difference. And it can not only change your life, but it will change other people's lives as they start noticing the hope of heaven, the hope of eternity lived out in your daily life, simply because you remember and you know and you acknowledge who's in the boat with you. Who's in the boat? So church, I'm going to leave you with that. Who's in your boat? Remember who's with you. And remember who can give you the peace that no one else can give you, even in the unknown, even in the uncertainty, and especially right now in the times we're living. Let's pray. God, thank you so much for your word. I thank you that in the midst of the worst possible storm that we could imagine, beyond the virus, beyond anything else that's coming in the next few weeks, but on a personal level, the storms may come in our lives and our families. There is no storm that you are not already on the other side of. And there is no waves and there's no wind that you don't hold in your hand. There's no situation that's ever been out of your control. God, would you just remind us that you are with us, that you are with us, and that you are still on the throne, and that you are still in control of everything in our lives. We love you, God, and we want to live for you, and help us to be a hope to this lost and dying world. Help us to be a hope to our community, to the people we come in contact with, and help us to be the hope that only you can bring. In your name, amen. Church, love you guys. Thank you so much for joining us today. Listen, tune in next week, same time, same place. And look for us throughout the week. We're going to be trying to connect with you guys on social media more and more. Find ways to connect with us. We want to hear from you, and stay connected to your circles. There's ways to do that. We'll be letting you know how to do that in an easy way for you guys who are in circles. We're staying connected, so it's still happening everywhere in South Florida, and still going strong. Anyway, love you guys. See you next week.